was
side is
concerned
better
about
than my
that.
backside. So,
That's good.
is that good?
Yeah.
Good.
And what I'll do next.
Piece. I don't know what the lady's name is that my wife responded to, but she wanted something for the, in case children wanted to interact. So I'm making some little ones just so if somebody comes, I can give the kid, I can hit a little rasp or a piece of sandpaper and just, you know, see if they get interested in it. And then they can take it with them when they leave. So that's what I'm up to.
Leaving a car, I dressed the loom, which took me about 2.5 hours. And that's from measuring to putting it on the warp, that's called warping the loom. And now I'm doing the weaving part, which is the web. So this whole project will take me about 5 to 6 hours from start to finish. That's the reason for the prices on woven goods. They're very labor intense.
For a yo-yo quilt, all these little pieces will be assembled into a quilt, and eventually, it takes about 150 of them, so I gotta plug along at it. They start with small pieces like this. I use a nickel to trace around to get the piece small enough, and then I stitch around the edges of it and cover it up. It's not that big. Crocheting it out, yeah. The one right there.
Does it take long?
I can do one in about, I work hard at it, 4 days. I just sit there in my chair, before I know it, the time passes. I like to use the variegated, I like to watch the colors.
I'm going to set these up in a typical 18th century battle scenario, and definitely of a sort of scenario that Washington would have preferred to do but often could not, and that is what's called linear tactics. Linear tactics are just the classic example of long lines of men firing directly at each other at relatively close ranges. Washington wanted to do that. That was a European style of fighting, but frankly he didn't have the men who were trained for it, so quite often they didn't get a chance to even try it in too many of the battles during the Revolutionary War. But when we did, actually quite often we were very successful. The British were not expecting that until the British would use the bayonet. That was the one thing Americans had a hard time with, partially because of equipment. We just, frankly, just did not have bayonets to answer back with. We just didn't have them. So now we have one line, and then we have a second line, and so I try to get the scale a little closer, it being something like that. And to get the maximum effect, you would have people up front kneeling, while people in the back would fire between and over the heads of the people in front, like this. And that way you can pack more people in to make their shots, and they would have one round fired, and the next group behind here would advance forward, and they rotate around. And in a really good, competent army, a fast-loading army, they would actually be able to do this with only 2 groups, one up front firing, one in back loading. But usually they didn't do it that way. They tried to have 3. But that all depended on the army, the era, and what their commanding officers are expecting for rate of fire. Because the more rounds you put out, the faster you theoretically can land them into the enemy.